Hello, everybody, and a very, very warm welcome here to the Wine with Jimmy channel. Thank you for, of course, stopping by to Everything Vinous. This is wine education for everybody, and it's really designed for those of you that just want to know more about a specific topic, like you'll see here, Portugal, or if you are a student of wine, you are searching for the holy grail of wine knowledge. So, before I begin, please, if you have been to Portugal, if there's a specific grape variety you like, if you like the Douro Valley, you prefer the fortified wines or the non-fortified wines, please do get in touch, and you can do so by commenting on this video below or contacting me via social media. Look at that beautiful picture there. It is always a stunning backdrop of any presentation about the Douro Valley. That's actually not the Douro River. That's the Tua River that runs into it, but still, it's very classic. This is in the Cima Corgo. Now let's rock and roll talking about where we're focusing on. Of course, this is a new series for Portugal, looking at the Douro, okay, series 3, and we are going to be looking at part 1 here of 4, the introduction, history, and wine business. Parts 2, 3, and 4 are only available to those of you that will subscribe to my e-learning portal. You'll find the information about that over at www.winewithjimmy.com. But this video is nice and free, so sit back and relax. Let's get stuck in to talking about the location to begin with of the Douro. And it's always a great idea to really fathom the specific location of the region so we know who we are talking about. So this is possibly the most well-known region from Portugal, and the Douro region itself for wine makes more than any other in the whole of the country. There are just shy of 40,000 hectares of vines registered for the production of DOC wine, and that is either for Porto DOC, so our fortified wines, or the Douro DOC, which is for unfortified wines. Now, remember, I just showed you a wonderful picture. So here in the box is the Douro Valley. You'll see the Tua River, which runs from the northern section south into Douro, into the Cima Corgo, which is the central subzone. That is where we're looking at on that previous picture. Quite spectacular it is as well. Now, of course, the fortified wine has the greater historic kind of significance. It has a lot of history and is the most known with its high alcohol and residual sugar. And certainly those two things, that higher alcohol, residual sugar, the fortified aspect of it meant that it was able to traverse lots of merchant locations, lots of fleet ships to go across the empires of the world, becoming very well known. Of course, the standard unfortified wines would spoil on board ship, hence why fortified wines became so successful in those international markets. But there have always been unfortified, so non-spirit added wines here, but typically they would stay quite local in this area. And in fact, the Douro DOC, so the qualification for Douro wine, still non-fortified, was only created actually in 1982. So it's only actually just celebrated 40 years of existence, which is quite crazy, of course. Now, the first ambitious Douro red was made by Fernando Nicolau de Almeida, who worked at the time as a winemaker for Ferreira Port. Now, as so many of these stories happen, so much from the Iberian Peninsula, he left and went to Bordeaux. So he visited Bordeaux and learnt a lot whilst he visited. And he was convinced to return to the Douro Valley in northern Portugal to put into practice the knowledge that he had acquired whilst visiting Bordeaux. He was very much convinced that high quality wine could be made from Douro grapes and not be fortified. Now, in 1952, He made the first vintage of Bassa Verra. You'll see the picture of it here. So I've scribbled the name up here as well. And that's actually the bottle of the 1952 you see there. And he cooled the fermentation tanks with ice brought upriver from Matosinhos, which is the fishing port west of Porto City. Now, it was first produced in the Quinta do Vale do Mau in the Douro Superior subregion, so the one which is much more continental and, of course, connecting to Spain. He experimented with various different grape varieties, different fermentation vessels, and different types of oak for aging the wine. He finally settled on Tinta Roriz, which, of course, is Tempranillo in Spain, and Aragonés in other parts of Portugal. And that was the major part of his blend, with other local Portuguese varieties making up the rest. Now, this wine, Bassa Verra, was not actually successful or popular when it was first released, but now it commands super premium prices and actually can be 10 times the value of a good vintage port. So the wine's very much respected today. Now, let's take us across to the next picture. Now, despite Almeida's efforts, production of high quality Douro unfortified wine did not actually really get underway, generally until Portugal actually ascended to the European Union in 1986. Of course, it was called the European Community there. Now it's called the European Union. Now, this brought the necessary finance and really the finance to invest into modern winemaking equipment, such as stainless steel and also temperature control. A few Douro estate owners brought a court case to be allowed to export port from the estates, the quintas, in the Douro. Up until then, all port wine had to be exported from Villanova de Gaia, which is the port lodge's monopoly, where the major port shippers had their warehouses and bottling lines. The case succeeded, and this, of course, kick-started the development of a modern generation of unfortified Douro wines, many of which are estate single quinta wines. You will see here, this is Quinta do Valado, producing dry wine since 1993. So you're talking about, of course, 1986 being the Portugal joining the European community, and then lots of investment flooding in. So many new wineries being established in the late 80s and early 90s. And Quinta do Valado, you'll see here with its rather sexy built-in winery to the terraces, is very much in that time scale. A little bit to the wine business now. So, although port, so your fortified product, accounts for over 60% of the region's total production, that means that Douro unfortified still wine is 40%, as your pie chart will show you there. But the interesting thing is that the amount in recent times has grown. So, if you go back to 2008, there was somewhat like 330,000 hectolitres of still unfortified Douro wine being produced. And then in 2017, so nearly 10 years later, it's up to 515,000. So you see a significant increase there of roughly about 60, 70%. Now, this means that we have a real focus in modernity for this style, and I think it's going to become even more significant in the next 20 years. Now, port production volumes and prices for grapes are controlled by the beneficio, but such control does not exist for Douro DOC wines. Those prices are influenced by supply, demand, and the market. In any given vintage, the prices grape growers receive for Douro DOC grapes is substantially lower than those earned for port grapes. In years of surplus, prices drop even further, often to below the cost of production. This is a significant issue. Some producers and critics argue that artificial prices for port grapes are subsidizing the growing of grapes for unfortified wine. So the elevated prices, therefore, for port grapes, that money from that winery that they're gaining more money from, they're able to then lose it a little bit in terms of the Douro DOC. Things will have to change, of course. Now, the VR of Durinense produces much lower volumes. You see, I've highlighted it in green there. It's actually only just over 6,000. That's it, 6,000 hectolitres in 2018. This is the Vino Regional that is the same area as the Douro Valley, but it is a Vino Regional that allows non-local varieties such as Syrah, Riesling, and Chardonnay. So the international varieties typically. Now, there certainly is a large choice of premium wines, many of which are made from estate-grown grapes and named after the Quinta. Many of the well-known port producers like Symington, Quinta do Noval, and Nearport from Dirk Nearport make a range of Douro unfortified wines. The top wines will come from select estates, parcels, and they certainly have been previously earmarked for wine as opposed to port production. But of course, there are co-ops. So inexpensive, high-volume wines are often sourced from different quintas, which may belong to growers and may be made by one of the region's 23 cooperatives. There is the Adega Cooperativa de Favios that you'll see just there in your picture. And then finally, exports for this region. In 2019, the domestic market accounted for about 2/3 of sales by volume. So, of course, a third is then exported, and the major markets are Canada, Brazil, and the United Kingdom. Well, that brings me to the conclusion of this first video that looked at the location, the history, and a little bit of wine business. Please do join me when we get stuck into the climate, weather, soils, and vineyard management on part 2. Remember, this part 2 and 3 and 4 that follow are available only as exclusive content on my e-learning portal. So that's for those of you that subscribe. That's over at www.winewithjimmy.com. And that really is it. So if you do have any questions, please do get in touch, comment on the video below. And if you find yourself in the UK, come and say hi for a class, glass or bottle. I've been Jimmy Smith. Ciao for now. Goodbye.